Hey, it's Keisha. Welcome and welcome back. So, today we're going to talk about how to be healthier spiritually and practically, kind of following on from our series of how to improve your finances financially and spiritually. So, a couple weeks ago, I was talking to someone about some changes I was making in my diet, and that I been eating a lot of junk food and finally put the hammer down and stopped. And they were asking me what kind of tips I had. And initially, I was like, man, I mean, nothing that you haven't already heard before, nothing that anybody ever wants to hear. And so I didn't have anything. And then I thought about it for a few minutes, and there was something. Um, and it turned out it was a really good thought. And then as I thought on it more, I realized that I had enough material to do this video. So I'll make sure to mention that at the end, and we'll talk about the other things first because there are other things that come before that last little piece of wisdom. First things first, when it comes to the practical on how to be healthier, and I'm talking about this from the perspective of losing weight just because um, that's been the modality through which I've learned all of this, right? I have over my lifetime lost in probably 200-300 pounds, gaining and losing it back, gaining it back and losing it again, and I'm kind of on that wave now where I've gained a lot of weight and I've been focused on other things, and now I'm coming back to food and really all of these principles and seeing the reduction happening, and I'm becoming more healthy in the process. So I'll talk about it from that perspective. The first and the biggest step to take in terms of improving your health practically is getting more sleep. And this is the one I probably run from the hardest. Yeah, the sleep dragon is always after me and never is able to catch up. My normal time is like to fall asleep or go to bed around 3 o'clock. And throughout the pandemic, like those two, actually the year before that, so those last 2 to 3 years, that's been my bedtime, and it's been ridiculous. I can function during the rest of the day on 4 to 5 hours sleep, but that doesn't mean I should. And actually, in terms of my health, that's one area where it's suffered because if you're not getting enough sleep, you cannot make good food decisions. I mean, you might struggle, you might effort to make other decisions and come out okay. But with food, it's like that's something that we'd like to think is so automatic, and we really shouldn't have to give much effort to it. But when you're trying to get healthier or trying to lose weight, you do have to give effort to to thinking about food and its preparation. And um, not having enough sleep, decision fatigue happens fast and it happens early. So getting enough sleep is really important. And I do notice, like, I'm going to bed closer to 12:30, 1 o'clock now. I notice that I'm sleeping better and I'm waking up more rested, and I can feel that it gives me options throughout the day. I don't feel as harried, especially when it comes to food. And if I tend to get stressed, if I get stressed during the day and my tendency is to eat something, I usually have a little more patience to resolve the stress before I start eating. And that kind of moves us into the next thing. So, yeah, sleep is top of the list. Number one, you got to get more of it, and it's got to be good. Food. So, there's so many things about food, but just some of the key things that I think have really made the difference in me functioning optimally and seeing other people kind of function the same. And that is not eating 3 hours before bedtime. It'll kind of fall under the category of some sort of intermittent fasting, or basically you're giving yourself a period of time, a break where you are not eating and consuming calories, and you're giving your body a time to digest and recuperate and replenish itself, and then you start with food again the next day. 3 hours before bedtime, because I go to bed so late, technically I could be eating at midnight, and that wouldn't seem to be late if I'm going to bed at 3. But eating at midnight is pretty stupid in my case, so we're not doing that. Um, for me, 3 hours before bedtime, like if I had a reasonable bedtime, it'd be like 10 o'clock, right? So 3 hours before is 7. And I do find that when I'm on the schedule of 10 to 7, 11 to 7 in terms of intermittent fasting, that seems to work for me. Breakfast, I say, everybody's an individual and do what you want to do, because some people really do benefit from having a smart breakfast. And smart, by smart, I mean for your constitution, because, you know, we can categorize a lot of things as a good breakfast, but if it's not good for you, then it doesn't really matter. But some people do well with breakfast and some don't. I tend not to be hungry first thing in the morning, which is good because I have other things to do, like my morning four, making the bed, doing yoga, or being on the mat in some way, um, meditating, and writing in my journal. And so if I'm taking it, even on the weekend, if I'm taking it leisurely, it might be a couple hours before I'm ready to eat. And that tends to be the way it works throughout the day, because I'll start working, or throughout the week, and I'll start working, and it'll normally be like 10:30, 11, and I'm like, oh, I think I'm hungry. But I tend to defeat that with, a glass of fiber, or a glass of water, or whatever. But yeah, so I tend to go 10 to 7, 11 to 7. But that 3 hours before bedtime, just giving yourself a break to digest your food and to relax your body and your organs in that regard is really critical. Um, and one of the things I think about whenever I think about whenever I hear somebody say, don't eat 3 hours before bedtime, Missy Elliott. If you all remember, she was like, she was round, right? And then she lost all that weight, and she credits her weight loss to, not eating. I think she said not eating after 6, but basically that falls into the category of intermittent fasting. So if you haven't heard of that before, I say look into it. But no food 3 hours before bedtime. One of the things that I started doing, um, somewhat intuitive or accidentally, was that I was living overseas, and in Kyrgyzstan they don't have huge dinner plates like the 10 or 12-inch dinner plates that we're so used to in America. They have the smaller salad plate, and that's like the primary plate. So when I went overseas, that's how we ate dinner, and so I got used to eating off a smaller plate. Transition moving back in the States, I still eat from a smaller plate, and it seems to make a difference, because if the idea is that you eat first with your eyes, when you're taking a salad plate, or a saucer, and filling it with food, it's going to be fuller with less food. And your eyes perceive that, wow, I'm having a full plate of food. And you're even telling yourself, I'm eating a full plate. And so that does something to you mentally, where, that and enough can be satiating. It doesn't mean that you won't go back for seconds, and sometimes that happens. I mean, I'm not opposed to that, so I do it, whatever. But eating off the smaller plate to start, that one plate is usually enough. And I find I do have larger dinner plates that I'll use for, like, to make a big or platter of something, or if I've got a bowl of soup and something on the side and I need the plate to help balance it all. I notice that when I put the food on the larger dinner plate, it's like, whoa, who's eating this? Like, that's a lot. Um, and when I go back to my smaller plate, it feels like, oh, that's normal. So a way to kind of help manage portion control, I think, is using the smaller plate. I tend to use a smaller fork too, but I don't know if that's necessarily related, but the two for me kind of go hand in hand. Another thing about food that I don't think people talk about enough, though we're all trying to figure it out, is eating right for your constitution. Um, we all have different ideas about what eating healthy is, or what eating clean is. But if it's not really suited for your constitution, then it doesn't matter, because you can still be, causing inflammation or dis-ease in the body, from foods that don't serve you. I mean, you might be someone who doesn't do well with nightshades, but wouldn't necessarily know that because you're always eating tomatoes and ketchup, and then suddenly you stop eating tomatoes and potatoes and, um, peppers, bell peppers, and then it's like these things clear up. I found that to be the case with me. So, figuring out your constitution. Now, I've had for a long time a natural interest in food, and so for me, the tweaking of figuring out the constitution it's been fun. It's been part of the journey and the effort and what I've spent, put my attention towards. If that's not your journey, because it's not for everybody, then it might be worth it to have a session or two with a nutritionist to find out what is right for you. Um, I can't stress enough, like, how much of a difference that makes. Through my self-discovery and what I've known from having talked to different my acupuncturists and people like that, um, I have spleen. I have a spleen deficiency. So when I look up the list of foods for spleen deficiency, what I should and shouldn't eat, and I stick to what I should eat, I mean, I find it's taken me a while to figure out exactly what that means, because there's some lists where some ingredients overlap, and or some foods overlap, and so I would get caught up. But I would say these last few weeks, a month or so, that I've given up junk food and pretty much all processed food. And I've been really like honed and focused on eating specifically what's right for my constitution. I have felt fantastic. That has also meant that I'm eating less because I'm full off of what I am eating. And because I'm full, I'm not going back for more, an hour or two later. And so that's also something that is helping, release some of the weight. So if finding out your constitution isn't your particular bent, it might make sense to talk to a nutritionist to figure out what foods will help you function at your most optimum level. And that going to a nutritionist doesn't have to be expensive. For a while, I worked with my chiropractor, who also happened to be a naturopath, and I think my sessions, my appointments were like $40, and I made tremendous. That's when I learned that I was deficient in magnesium. In doing more research, most of us are, but when I learned I was deficient in magnesium, and we got me on a magnesium supplement, my energy went through the roof, and suddenly it was like all the building blocks had something to stick to and could stick together, and my health kind of like stacked on top of itself. And that was a tremendously helpful experience. So I definitely recommend that to you. So, food is one thing, snacking is something entirely different. So snacking, when the answer is yes, I'm going to snack because we tend to. Eating snacks that are within your constitution, not like junk food snacks, but things that are really suited for you, make the difference. I've also found a very practical step. I used to keep all of my snacks on the counter in this one little, on this big plate. The problem that I had with that is I'd be tooling around the apartment looking for something to do, bored, just finished one thing, about to start something else, but don't know what it's supposed to be. And I would see all the snacks on the counter and like go stand over there and just snack on things while I'm figuring out what's next. And then, realize that I've plowed through a significant, more than a little bit of like container of nuts or whatever it was. So I found that putting the snacks away in the pantry behind that closed door means that I can walk by the kitchen and not, it's open concept, as most places are. I can walk by the kitchen and not see the snacks and not be tempted by them. And in fact, because I don't go into the pantry often, I noticed over the last 2 weeks, every time I go to the pantry and I see the snacks, I'm like, oh, I forgot about those. Oh, I forgot about those. And, when have I ever forgotten about a snack? I mean, that's just like never happened. But this is a new experience because I'm keeping them out of sight. And that is definitely making a difference. I have to imagine that goes along with there's a principle in feng shui that if you're, like when you walk in the front of your house, kitchens are usually right near the entry. But if you're walking into your house and the first thing you can see is the kitchen with the refrigerator and food and whatever, then you're more likely to be drawn in and go straight to the kitchen and eat. So one of the cures for that in feng shui is to hang like a beaded curtain or something between the entry and the opening for the kitchen, so that when you walk in, you see the shimmer of the beads, and the energy of walking over the threshold and wanting to dig into food gets dispersed. And you walk into your house and do other things, and then when you walk into the kitchen, it's like, okay, now as you cross over that threshold, you're like, okay, now I'm ready to eat. So there's value, I think, in keeping those things out of sight. Um, and just know, like with your snacking, um, craving is an indication of addiction, and that craving is the withdrawal. Like you haven't had that thing that your body's um, used to processing. Usually, it's that it's pasta, bread, chips, something sweet, things that give you that quick dopamine hit. And so, say I'm already talking, dopamine, those means, the morphines, those things like that. Those are, we get hooked on those chemicals. And so recognizing that your craving for something is a withdrawal from having it, taking that information into account and being like, okay, maybe that's not something I need to be eating, because if you have that type of intense craving for it, it's probably not something that's good for you. Um, sure, we get a taste for something every now and again, but this like craving that you eat everything in the house until you have that one flavor or that one thing that's going to flip the switch, that's a sign of something a little more serious to pay attention to and to look to resolve. Oftentimes with cravings too, there are mineral deficiencies that are coming to the forefront. Um, when we're craving chocolate, usually that's a sign of magnesium deficiency. And so having a bit of magnesium either in supplement or in your foods, that seems to help. Um, I find that when I'm craving potato chips or something sweet and salty, having like celery or more green leafy vegetables, that seems to cut those cravings. When you're moving your body from a more acidic to alkaline state, um, the cravings tend to, well, they're strong at first, but then as you remain in that alkaline state, it's much less. And usually it's when you're in that acidic mode, things like soda, chocolate, chips, pretzels, like your burgers, like those heavier junk foods. Those create a more acidic environment, so it wants more of itself. But as you transition to more alkaline, your fresh fruits, your vegetables, especially your green vegetables, those cravings will disappear, and your taste for those things will change. One of the things that struck me the very first time that I started fasting and juicing was that I think I juiced for probably a month or so fairly consistently and hadn't had junk food and sweets because there just wasn't room for it. When you're drinking juice, that's real food and it's sustenance, and you just don't have much food or much interest in other food. And then like I had some ice cream or something, and it just tasted horrible. And I've never said that ice cream has tasted horrible. So yeah, it's just a testament to the power of vegetables and getting your system switched over. But then snacking, when really it's not about the food, and the answer is no, you shouldn't be snacking, but you're doing it anyway. I want to introduce you to this concept. The Japanese have this word called kuchibayashi. Kushisabishi. Kushisabishi. And it means loneliness of the mouth. And it's this idea like that you eat because your mouth is lonely, or maybe we consider more that like mindless eating when you're thinking doing something else, but you're eating because you're just eating, right? Um, and that's, I think, an area where we can take our power back and make huge strides in our efforts to be healthier. Um, because in that moment, you need to take a breath, you need to take a beat and be like, okay, am I really hungry? And oftentimes the answer is no. And it's like, okay, well, if the answer is no, then what am I? What do I need? What do I really need in this moment is the question. And it might be that you just need a 5-minute break. It could be that you need a glass of water. So something I do, like to give myself some time to think about this, instead of rushing to just grab whatever's nearby, is to take a breath and to take a few deep breaths and just kind of bring my power back to myself and just calm down. Um, Getting a glass of water usually helps because, hunger and thirst are often mistaken for each other, or rather, thirst is often mistaken for hunger. So having that glass of water or a glass of, a juice or something seems to help with that. If I haven't been outside, going outside to check the mail or just get some fresh air. That usually helps. Um, doing like, I have a list of, running list of things to do, and maybe I'll just take one of those things that are really short and just do that for a minute, or I'll do a couple of things, and that'll take my mind off food. And that's when I'll usually realize, oh, I'm not really hungry. I was thirsty. Oh, I'm not really hungry. I just, needed some fresh air. Oh, I'm not really hungry. I just needed to clear my head for a second. Um, and for each time, it doesn't mean that, so if I do that and those are the responses, that's great. It might be 10, 20 minutes later, okay, I find myself back in the kitchen again and I'm looking for something to eat. And that's okay, because for each time that I defeat that feeling by giving myself what it needed, whether it was water or breath or some fresh air, that's a win. I'm not trying to not eat at all. I'm just trying to eat less, and when I do eat, make smarter choices. And those are all actions of someone, to me, who's making a smarter choice. And it shows up in my weight coming off. So yeah, just taking that moment to ask those questions and just check in and discern what is it that you're really feeling. Because sometimes, like I said, it's just boredom, or you don't know what to do next. And so, we tend to do things that we're familiar, like that path is already trod. And so if our usual habit is just to go get something to eat or to snack on something, grab something, then we're going to do that mindlessly, when really we need to be a little more present and really ask what is it that we need. And then whatever that guidance is, do that. And that's what brings me to my last point that I came to, and I shared this with my friend. When you have declared to yourself, I'm getting healthier, I want to get healthier, I want to lose weight, I want to make better choices. When you've made that declaration to yourself, in those quiet moments where you get the guidance to get up and go for a walk, get up and have a glass of water, put the chips back, don't buy that cake, follow that guidance. That still small voice within is your higher self working with you to give you the result that you declared that you wanted. And so for every time that you follow that guidance, you strengthen the connection so you can trust it when you hear it. And because you're following it, you're going to see more of it, because there's a positive benefit. What you focus on expands. You're feeling better, you're doing better, and so you continue to do more of that. And I find that that's been helpful in making me less regimented. I don't need as many rules about food if I'm following my body's natural guidance. And if the guidance is, get up off the couch and go for a walk, I've said that I want to be healthier. I said I want to be slimmer. I said I wanted to lose weight. That's not going to happen if I stay on the couch. And the effort it takes for me to fight that and be like, no, I don't want to. No, it's too hot. Maybe I'll go later. Oh, I don't feel like all of that. That's just energy wasted, which then makes me feel bad, which then I'll need to medicate with some sort of food, right? So by simply following the guidance I initially got, I put myself in a position where I've come back in from a walk. Oh, that felt great. Can't wait to take a shower. Maybe I'll have that juice now. It'll taste really good. And those are all the positive, the small, the incremental steps that you need to take to see, health in your body, radiance, and weight loss, if that's the ultimate goal. In this case, I didn't break it up necessarily into practically and spiritually. I mean, they're all very practical tips, but they have at their basis an underlying spiritual bent, especially when it comes to discerning. That just takes practice and listening to your voice and trusting it and seeing the positive results from it, so that you know that you can continue to trust it. And that's all I got for my good people. So, leave me questions and comments in the comments, and I will see you back for another video another time. Bye.